He was gone. The air in the room still felt heavy, even hours later. I stood by the window, looking out at nothing. The question had been whispered for months, then shouted in the silence after his last breath. Poison or stomach cancer? I had seen it all, every tremor, every complaint, every suspicious glance. It started subtly, a complaint about indigestion after a meal. Nothing unusual for a man of his habits, but then it became more frequent. He would clutch his stomach, a grimace on his face. My father died of this, he said once, his voice low, almost a premonition. His father, Charles Bonaparte, had died of stomach cancer. That fact always sat heavy in my mind. A family curse, some called it. Then came the vomiting. Not just after a rich meal, but often, violently. He lost weight. His skin took on a pallor I had never seen before, a grayish hue that spoke of deep illness. Dr. Antomarchi, young and eager, often seemed at a loss. He prescribed various remedies, purges, emetics. Nothing seemed to help. The emperor grew weaker, his once formidable energy draining away day by day. But then there was Montholin. Always there, always attentive, almost too much so. He managed the cellar, the wine. He was the one who often prepared the emperor's drinks, his special orgeat. I remember one evening, the emperor took a sip of wine Montholin had poured. He recoiled. This tastes strange, Montholin. Bitter. Montholin merely shrugged, suggesting the bottle might be off. But the emperor refused to drink more. He was always suspicious, even before his illness worsened. He had reason to be. The British, the Bourbons, they all wanted him gone. He spoke of plots, of attempts on his life. He had always been paranoid, but now it felt different, more grounded in his physical suffering. He would look at me, his eyes hollow, and say, "They will not rest until I am dead, Marchand. They will find a way." Was he speaking of the British, or someone closer? The symptoms, though. The constant, gnawing pain in his stomach. The blood he sometimes coughed up, dark and clotted. The extreme sensitivity to touch around his abdomen. These were not the signs of a simple poisoning, not the quick, dramatic collapse one might expect. This was a slow, agonizing decline. It mirrored the descriptions I had heard of his father's illness. Yet, the arsenic. Years later, they would speak of arsenic in his hair. I remember the wallpaper in his room, green, a shade that was fashionable then. It was known to contain arsenic. Could it have been that? A slow, environmental poisoning, not a deliberate act? But then, why the specific symptoms, the stomach focus? And why Montholin's constant presence, his strange demeanor? I recall a specific incident. The emperor had been particularly ill, writhing in pain. Montholin brought him a glass of something, a dark liquid. The emperor drank it, then almost immediately vomited. He looked at Montholin with a strange intensity. "What was that, Montholin?" he demanded. Montholin stammered, "Just a tonic, sire, to ease the pain." But the emperor refused anything from him for days after. He trusted me, he trusted Cipriani, but Montholin, there was always a shadow there. Dr. Arnott, the British physician, was called in later. He seemed more astute than Antomarchi, though he was often dismissed by the emperor as a spy. Arnott observed the same symptoms, the emaciation, the persistent vomiting. He spoke of a serous tumor in the stomach. A hard, cancerous growth. He was not surprised by the emperor's decline. The last weeks were unbearable. He could keep almost no food down. He was constantly thirsty, but water brought on more pain. He dictated his will, his final wishes. He spoke of France, of Marie-Louise, of his son. He was lucid, even in his suffering. He knew he was dying. He accepted it, in a way. He asked for his uniform, his boots. He wanted to die as a soldier. Then came the final days. The delirium, the fever. He spoke of battles, of Josephine. His breath grew shallow. I held his hand. It was cold, clammy. He looked at me one last time, his eyes wide, then closed them. A final sigh. He was gone. The autopsy. That was where the truth lay, or so we hoped. Dr. Antimarchi, Dr. Arnett, and several other British surgeons were present. I was there, watching. They opened him up. What they found was undeniable. His stomach was riddled with ulcers. One large, cancerous ulcer had perforated the wall, creating a hole. It was this perforation, they said, that had caused the peritonitis, the inflammation that ultimately killed him. The stomach was hard, thickened, diseased. It was exactly as Arnett had suspected, a serous tumor. Cancer. The arguments began immediately after. Some still whispered of poison. Montholin, of course, denied everything, played the grieving loyalist. But the physical evidence was there, stark and undeniable. The cancer had consumed him from within. It was a slow, relentless enemy, far more insidious than any quick-acting poison. I thought about the arsenic. Could it have been a slow poisoning that caused the cancer? Or exacerbated it? Perhaps. The wallpaper, the medicines he took, even the water on the island. But the autopsy showed a clear, advanced stage of stomach cancer, a disease that runs in his family. It was not a stomach ravaged by acute poisoning, but by a long-term, aggressive illness. The poison theory, I came to believe, was born of a need to find a villain, a specific act of malice, rather than the cruel indifference of disease. It was easier to blame Montholin, or the British, than to accept that even the greatest man could be brought down by something as common and relentless as cancer. Montholin was a suspicious character, yes. He may have even tried to poison him at some point, or administered something harmful. But the cause of death, the thing that truly killed him, was the cancer. The perforation of his stomach, the peritonitis. That was the final blow. He died of stomach cancer. I saw it with my own eyes, from the first complaint to the final incision. The poison was a whisper, a shadow, a possibility that haunted his last days and the years after. But the cancer was a brutal, undeniable reality. It was his father's disease, come to claim him too, on that desolate island. All arguments closed.